Stop waiting for permission to exist fully. A lion doesn't ask the jungle for approval. It claims its space. You must learn to trust your instincts, speak with conviction, and make decisions rooted in personal integrity. You are not here to blend in. You are here to take ownership of your presence. We live in a world that teaches people, often from a young age, to wait. Wait for permission. Wait for validation. Wait to be chosen. It conditions you to believe that your voice is only worth something if someone else affirms it, that your direction is only legitimate. But lions do not wait to be told who they are. They do not sit quietly in the shadows of the jungle waiting for applause. They stand in their place, not with arrogance, but with certainty. They move with the kind of authority that comes not from external validation, but from a deep internal alignment. You see, human beings are not that different. There's something primal in you, something ancient and fierce, that knows how to lead your life if you're willing to listen. But modernity trains it out of you. It whispers, play it safe, fit in, don't make waves. Let someone else speak first. So you mute your instincts, you soften your voice, and eventually you forget how powerful you really are. The tragedy isn't that people are weak, it's that they've been convinced they have no right to be strong. But let's be clear, the right to speak, to act, to decide is not granted to you by society. It's your birthright as a conscious being. You are responsible for your own existence. That means you don't need anyone's permission to think for yourself. You don't need consensus to take a stand. You don't have to be perfect before you move forward. In fact, if you wait until you're sure, until it's safe, until it's guaranteed to work, you'll never move at all, because certainty is a mirage. You act into clarity, not from it. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Lions live from their why, not for applause, not for agreement, but from a fundamental conviction about who they are and what they're here to protect. You must develop the same kind of internal compass, because if you don't, the world will hand you a script. It will tell you what you should want, how you should behave, who you're allowed to be, and you'll follow it until one day you realize they betrayed yourself for approval you never even really needed. This kind of authority isn't about dominance. It's not ego. It's not noise. It's depth, quiet strength. When you walk into a room, you don't need to raise your voice to take up space, but you do need to stop shrinking. You need to stop apologizing for being passionate, for being direct, for having opinions that don't always align with the crowd. Because the world doesn't change because people follow the rules. It changes because someone was brave enough to say, no, I see something different. The psychologist Carl Jung spoke about individuation, the process of becoming your truest self. And a critical part of that journey is stepping into your own authority, not in rebellion, not in defiance, but in truth, in ownership. You begin to trust your own vision. You realize that your life is yours to shape, and that with that freedom comes tremendous responsibility. You can no longer blame others for your stagnation, but neither do you have to wait for them to give you permission to grow. And this is where the lion becomes more than a metaphor. It becomes a standard, a way of being, not reactive but sovereign, not aggressive but immovable. You begin to act not out of fear of being small, but out of clarity that you were meant to stand tall. You stop asking, am I allowed? And start asking, what needs to be done? So I'll leave you with this. Stop seeking approval to be who you already are. Act like a lion, not to prove anything, but to remember that you were never meant to crawl. Lions feel fear, but they move forward anyway. The goal is not fearlessness, but mastery. Every meaningful pursuit will provoke discomfort. The lion acts despite fear, not in the absence of it. This is how courage is built, not by avoiding the battle, but by stepping into it, fully aware of the stakes. Fear for most people is misunderstood. We've come to treat it as a stop sign, an indication that we should turn back, step away, delay, or withdraw. But fear, in its purest form, isn't a warning against action. It's an invitation into it. A lion doesn't feel fearless because it's immune to danger. It feels fear the way all living things do. The difference is that the lion has learned how to move with it. It has conditioned itself to treat fear not as an enemy, but as a signal that something important lies on the other side. This is crucial, because if you continue to let fear define the edges of your world, your light will get smaller every year. Fear has a way of shrinking possibility. You avoid the difficult conversation. You don't apply for the opportunity. You suppress the part of you that wants to speak up, stand tall, or lead. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you trade your potential for a quiet, safe existence. But there's a cost to that kind of safety. It's the cost of becoming someone you don't recognize, someone who lives on the sidelines of their own life. The psychological roots of fear are deeply embedded in our evolutionary biology. Our nervous system is wired to detect threats, to protect us from harm, and to keep us alive. That was helpful when the threat was a predator in the jungle. But in the modern world, fear isn't always signaling real danger. Often it's just discomfort, uncertainty, rejection, judgment. And yet we react as if we're being hunted. The result is paralysis. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the discipline to move forward in the presence of it. That's what makes it valuable. If there's no risk, there's no courage. If there's no uncertainty, there's no opportunity to grow. In fact, if you're never afraid, it probably means you're not stretching. You're not evolving. You're just repeating. And repetition, no matter how comfortable, is a slow form of decay. This is where acting like a lion becomes a metaphor for psychological maturity. The lion doesn't avoid conflict. It enters it with discernment. It doesn't seek danger for the sake of drama, but it doesn't run from the necessary fight. You have to ask yourself, what are you avoiding right now? Because fear has you convinced it's too much. What territory have you refused to step into because the unknown feels unbearable? And who could you become if you move toward that resistance instead of away from it? Fear has a direction to it. It points. And where it points is often where your growth is hiding. So when you feel fear, ask yourself, not how do I get rid of this, but what is it telling me? Is this a fear of actual harm, or is it just the cost of expansion? Because every version of you that you admire, more confident, more capable, more fulfilled, is on the other side of a door labeled fear. And no one's going to open it for you. You have to walk through it yourself. The Stoic philosophers believe that suffering arises not from the events themselves, but from our interpretation of them. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that discomfort was part of the process of becoming. That adversity wasn't an interruption of life, it was life. Fear works the same way. It isn't the obstacle, it's the training ground. And the only way to transform it is to move through it, not around it. When you stop treating fear as a problem and start treating it as a compass, you reclaim your power. You begin to recognize that the trembling hands, the racing heart, the uneasy thoughts, they're not signs of weakness. They're signs that something meaningful is happening. They're reminders that you're on the edge of something real. So don't run from fear. Follow it. Let it lead you to the places you've been avoiding. Act like a lion, not because you're fearless, but because you've decided that fear is no longer your master. A lion isn't aggressive for the sake of dominance. It's protective of its pride, of its ground, of its purpose. Acting like a lion means knowing what's sacred to you and refusing to compromise it. Whether it's your values, your loved ones, or your dreams, you must develop the discipline to defend what matters most. You can't act like a lion if you don't know what you're willing to protect. Lions aren't just powerful, they're purposeful. They don't exert their strength randomly. They reserve it for what matters: their pride, their territory, their survival. This is something modern life often forgets. We admire power for its own sake, celebrate success without asking what it serves, and chase influence with no concern for its direction. But real strength, the kind worth cultivating, is grounded in responsibility. It defends. It stands guard. It draws a line and says, "This matters, and I will not allow it to be violated." The question is, what are you guarding? What matters so much to you that you're willing to suffer for it, to fight for it if necessary? That's where your power truly lies. Not in ambition detached from meaning, but in conviction backed by loyalty. Because without loyalty, power becomes noise. Without direction, strength turns into chaos. You have to know what you're standing for before your stance has any value. Psychologically, this speaks something even deeper. Every human being carries within them a set of non-negotiables, often unarticulated, but emotionally potent. These are the values that form the core of your identity: family, truth, justice, dignity, freedom, love. When you act in alignment with them, you feel whole. When you betray them, you feel broken. And it's not a vague uneasiness. It's a soul-level rupture, because to abandon what's sacred to you is to lose yourself in the process. This is where modern culture can become dangerous. It preaches tolerance to the point of apathy, fluidity to the point of formlessness. You're encouraged to keep everything open, to avoid strong opinions, to go with the flow. But lions don't drift. They define their territory. They set limits. And they do it not because they're rigid, but because they understand that without boundaries, nothing meaningful can survive. Especially true when it comes to relationships. Acting like a lion means protecting those you love, not just physically, but emotionally, morally, spiritually. It means becoming someone others can rely on, not out of dependency, but out of mutual respect. And it means refusing to tolerate dysfunction, manipulation, or betrayal simply to keep the peace. Because peace bought at the price of integrity is not peace, it's surrender. But it's not only about protecting others, it's about protecting your own purpose, your calling, your path. In a world full of distractions, you have to become fiercely loyal to your direction, because no one else will be. People will project their fears onto your dreams. They'll ask you to shrink so they can feel more comfortable. They'll confuse your discipline for arrogance, your focus for selfishness. But you don't owe the world your compliance. You owe it your truth. And sometimes that truth requires protecting. This is not a call to aggression. It's a call to alignment. Lions don't roar constantly. They're not loud unless they need to be. They don't fight every battle. But when they do engage, they commit fully. They act with precision. That's what you must learn, to choose your battles wisely. But when you choose them, to show up with your full strength, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. And here's the paradox. The more fiercely you protect what matters, the softer you can become in other areas, because you're no longer afraid. You know what you stand for. You're no longer drifting. You're rooted. People around you begin to feel it too. Your presence speaks for itself, not because you're intimidating, but because you're immovable where it counts. So don't waste your energy trying to look strong. Become strong in what you protect. Become a guardian of what is sacred to you, because that kind of strength doesn't just change your life, it shapes the lives of those around you. Act like a lion, not to dominate, but to defend. Let your strength have a purpose, and let that purpose make you unshakable. Lions don't follow the herd. They don't chase approval. They lead. And sometimes leadership means standing alone. The lion understands solitude not as a punishment, but as a space where clarity sharpens and identity forms. You must be willing to be misunderstood, judged, even rejected, if it means staying true to who you are. There's a powerful silence in the life of a lion, a kind of solitude that isn't accidental, it's chosen. You'll often see them alone, not because they're outcasts, but because they're self-possessed. They don't need the crowd to validate their strength. That's something human beings still struggle with. We are social creatures, yes, but too often we mistake belonging for conformity. We trade individuality for acceptance, and we shrink ourselves to fit into spaces that were never built to hold who we truly are. You can't act like a lion if you're constantly looking sideways, hoping someone approves of your steps. The lion doesn't ask the herd for direction. It moves according to an inner rhythm, guided by instinct, by intention, by clarity. And sometimes that means walking alone. Not a punishment, that's a necessity, because becoming who you're meant to be will often separate you from who you've been and from the people who were comfortable with the earlier, smaller version of you. There's a moment in every individual's life, if they're paying attention, when they're called to stand apart. It might be in a conversation where everyone agrees and you don't. It might be in a relationship that's eroding your integrity. It might be in a career path that looks stable but feels like slow spiritual death. And in that moment, you're forced to choose the comfort of fitting in or the discomfort of becoming real. The psychologist Carl Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also warned that individuation, the process of that becoming, is often lonely. Because to step in the collective, even for a while, is to step into a space where only your voice can guide you. And most people are terrified of that silence. They fill it with noise, with company, with distraction, because if they stopped long enough to listen, they might hear the truth. They might hear the truth that they've been playing a role instead of living a life. You're not here to play a role. You're here to lead your own existence. And leadership begins with self-ownership. You must be willing to disappoint others before you betray yourself. You must be willing to stand alone, not out of pride, but out of principle. Because if you wait for consensus before you move, you'll never move. And if you need permission to be yourself, you'll always be a version of someone else's expectations. This isn't about rejecting people. It's about rejecting dependency, emotional dependency, intellectual dependency, the need to be liked at the cost of your soul. You must be able to look in the mirror and say, I know who I am, and I can walk alone if I have to. Because solitude isn't weakness. It's training. It's where clarity is forged. It's where resilience is born. It's where the voice that's truly yours grows loud enough to lead. And yes, there will be loneliness. There will be misunderstanding. You'll lose people, not necessarily out of conflict, but out of growth. Not everyone is meant to walk with you through every chapter. And that's not your failure. That's your evolution. You're not abandoning them. You're honoring what's becoming true within you. The world respects those who have walked alone and come back standing. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't need your validation, but still shows up with compassion. That's what happens when you embrace your solitude. You stop needing the crowd, and as a result, you're finally able to serve it. Not as a follower, but as a leader. Not with arrogance, but with quiet conviction. So walk alone if you must, but never shrink. Let your solitude sharpen you. Let it strip away everything false. And when you return not with noise, but with presence. That's how a lion moves. A lion's roar is not mindless noise. It's declaration, warning, presence. In your life, your words, your actions, do not roar to be heard. Roar to declare your values. Roar to wake yourself up, to remind the world and yourself that you are not to be overlooked, that you're here and you're ready to rise. Power by itself is not impressive. Anyone can posture. Anyone can speak loudly. Take up space. Wear the mask of dominance. But real power, authentic, sustainable, meaningful power, is power that's under control. It's directed. It's restrained. It's conscious. And this is the final piece of acting like a lion. To master your instincts rather than be mastered by them. To possess strength so deeply that you don't need to constantly display it. A lion doesn't waste energy. It doesn't attack unless it has a reason. It doesn't chase every noise in the jungle. Its presence alone is enough to shift the behavior of everything around it. Why? Because it knows what it's capable of. It's not seeking proof. And this is something so many people today miss. They think confidence comes from showing off. But true confidence is quiet. It's found in the person who speaks less but says more, who doesn't react to every insult, every slight, every moment of tension, because they're not driven by insecurity. From a psychological perspective, this is the integration of the shadow. Carl Jung talked about this at length. The idea that real maturity means facing the darkest parts of yourself, not to indulge them, but to understand them. The aggressive impulses, the need for control, the hunger for power. These exist in all of us, and to pretend otherwise is to remain naive. But when you confront these parts, when you integrate them into your awareness, instead of suppressing or denying them, you become whole. And with that wholeness comes a kind of calm authority that can't be faked. We live in a culture that encourages self-expression, but doesn't teach self-regulation. People are constantly told to be themselves, but they aren't taught how to master themselves. So what do you get? Emotionally volatile individuals chasing status, lashing out when challenged, reacting impulsively. That's not power. That's chaos. That's a person ruled by emotion instead of governed by principle. To act like a lion is to discipline your power, to become a person who can bite but chooses not to unless it's necessary. It's to harness your aggression, your ambition, your intensity, and use them with precision. Not in every situation, not for ego, but for the right purpose at the right time. And this control extends beyond how you treat others. It also affects how you treat yourself. Self-control is the beginning of all mastery. If you can't govern your own impulses, your procrastination, your anger, your laziness, your addictions, how can you expect to lead anyone else? You become a slave to whatever feels good in the moment. And there's no courage in that. There's only comfort. Lions don't live for comfort. They live for clarity, discipline, and purpose. There's a reason the strongest people you know are often the kindest. It's not because they're weak. It's because they've seen what they're capable of and decided to use their power wisely. That's what makes them trustworthy. And you can become that person too. But it starts by turning inward, by asking not, how do I appear strong? But how do I become strong in a way that serves something greater than me? So when the world tries to provoke you, when it throws insult, chaos, temptation, or fear your way, you don't have to react. You pause, you assess, you choose. That is the mark of someone who isn't owned by their power, but has earned it. Restraint is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. So act like a lion, not by roaring all the time, but by knowing exactly when to roar and why. And in that discipline, you'll find something more powerful than dominance. You'll find peace